Good evening and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, tonight's video is a return to Master of the Game. So I'm going to do part 2 today and start tackling the idea of who can be a Master Game Master. So if you watched the previous video, I really apologize for the sound quality of that. I didn't realize that my microphone here was not on, and the headset was on, but it's actually sitting on the floor next to me over here. So it still picked up sound, but you really do have to crank it up on your end, and I apologize for that. Um, what I will do is because this video is going to be just a very much a shorter section as to who can be a game master, I will go back over those few techniques and roles that Gary Gygax wrote about in the previous video. So let me switch right to that so we can still keep this one kind of a kind of shorter version of it anyway. So let me get here. So here we have it, and I will scroll up and go to just a recap on a few of these roles that a game master, and so far, surprisingly enough, Gary Gygax has not mentioned Dungeon Master once yet. So what is a game master? And he goes through it, and in my video, I went through each of these and detailed them. These functions are, so here are the 7 functions of a game master: moving force, creator, designer, arbiter, overseer, director, and the umpire, referee, judge. The secondary functions of a game master are narrator, interpreter, force of nature, personification of non-participant characters, all other personifications, and the supernatural power. And as I stated, I went through all of these. Now, I want to just reiterate moving force. A game has many participants, and the GM is the crucial figure amongst the 3 or more players who make up the group. While the game itself might be bad or good, the play of the game system is only as good as the ability of the GM to understand and present it. Thus, a moving force. The GM is responsible for mustering the players, that means bringing them all to the table, and inspiring continued vitality. And he goes through several, techniques of doing this, and also in some other writings of his, going back to Dragon Magazine issue number 24, which I spent a little time talking about as well. He really talked about how to keep a campaign kind of vital and keep players engaged and such. And I will spend a little bit more time with that. But now let's get to today's focus of who can be a master game master. So I'm just going to scroll down and get right to it. Should be getting to it very soon. Here we go. So who can be a master game master, or what is the nature of the beast? You can be a master or grand master of game mastership. Compared to what it takes to gain the status of an expert GM, which we assume you have done or are well on your way to doing, there is only a small amount of effort required to attain mastery to at least a small degree. The limiting factors are not your ability and your talent. Boundaries come from the limits of time, effort, financial resources imposed by the demands of everyday life upon your activity in the RPG arena. It is thus likely that the degree of mastery you will be able to attain will be restricted by those boundaries. So once again, the boundaries is time, effort, financial resources. There is another key factor, that is desire. The amount of desire you have will drastically affect the degree of mastery attained. With a strong desire, the limiting factors, which would otherwise preclude reaching a higher degree of mastery, will fall away. A master GM must consider the limitations which pertain to the individual, and these limitations are discussed here. Financial considerations are typically the greatest restraint on the aspiring master GM, and possible solutions will be touched upon in Chapter 3, Where to Begin. Generally, however, scholastic or occupational demands must necessarily consume the greatest portion of each day's waking hours. Ironically, the group that is most active and desirous of attaining mastery happens to be the least economically able to handle the cost of doing so. RPG players are young students, by and large. The exception to this is the professional game designer, of course, but because such individuals are a minute portion of the RPG audience, we won't consider them, other than to encourage all interested game masters towards mastery so they can earn income, if not principal livelihood, from the design and authorship of role-playing games and supplementary game materials. The vast majority of GMs, however, must face the reality of pursuing their interests in free time as a hobby. This whole section here is kind of, odd to me, how he's framing it. And basically he's saying that the financial consideration is that you're either working or you're playing, and it just appears to him that the people with the least amount of economic resources are actually playing the game the most, unless of course you're an industry person. Then you're honing your skills, and you're becoming both financially with more wherewithal, while you're creating game content. So the vast majority of the GMs, however, must face the reality of pursuing their interests in free time as a hobby. All right, and I'm not quite sure that when Gary wrote this was 1989. I was still a teenager, basically, or very close to not a teenager. Actually, no, I wasn't a teenager anymore. I was 22 years old. So yeah, I was a college student, but I was already not really engaged at the same level as I was back when I was a young teen, and so on. So we had a lot of time to play as students in junior high school and high school and such. I probably had less time to play when I was in college because I was also working full time. But as a professional now, I could certainly dedicate, probably close to maybe 10 hours a week to the hobby, and I work long hours at work and commute and such. I'm probably pushing a over a 60-hour work week, plus then I still have about another 10 hours that I dedicate to the hobby. So I'm kind of, plus I have a family on top of that, and everything else. So it's I'm not quite sure where Gary is getting his calculations for the amount of leisure time that actually exists for working people. Um, but anyway, it is therefore very important to make every hour count, hence the use of free time inside quotation marks, because time that is really free is time that is wasted. Yet there still remains the dichotomy in gaming and time allotment. Student enthusiasts may have the time and can make the effort, but lack suitable resources to satisfy the financial requirements, while the older enthusiasts are usually sufficiently funded but lack the time and quite often are tired and not able to put in as much effort as is needed. I like I said, I don't know where he's getting these numbers from. I mean, if all you needed was the monster manual, the the DMG and the player's handbook, back in the '80s, that was maybe $60, maybe. So I'm not quite sure, and that's a one-time purchase. You know, buy it once and it lasts virtually a lifetime. Certainly 40 years. I mean, that my books are 40 years, old and or closer to 50, and still fine. So so there are ways to better utilize time and make it more productive. I probably skipped a line. Um, we're usually sufficiently funded but lack of better time. Yeah, so there are ways to better utilize time and make it more productive. Observing how people interact may lend to greater mastery of non participant character personification. All right, so he's basically saying that you would have to better utilize your time and observe how people interact, uh, may lend a greater mastery of non participant character personification. All right. Routine and vacation experiences can be used to build the mental library of material for the RPG milieu with little effort. Nature and science programs on TV are excellent sources of ideas and inspiration, and most other shows are also useful for a bit of plot drama or comedy. Newspaper catalogs and all the humdrum things of life can be filed away in the mental library for later use in GMing adventures. Even when you are not on free time, there is much to be taken in which can and should be applied towards mastery. In school, you are learning all manner of things which are applicable to games and game scenarios. Traveling to school or to work and home again enables you to be observing others, see how they act, speak, walk, and so forth. Every game milieu has populations who will behave like the people in our real world. Pay attention to them. The same things applies to working situations. The actions and the behavior of the fellow workers, the operation of a business, group interactions, and the requirements of your particular occupation all can be made to apply in some way or another to what goes into an RPG. After all, as game master, you are the overseer of a whole world. There is also free time, which is spent doing family related activities, watching television, seeing films or plays, dining out, playing sports, traveling, and all other things one does day to day, year to year. All you see, do, and experience has potential game application. A master game master, or GM, observes and utilizes his or her observations. True expenditure of effort comes in putting ideas onto paper in a comprehensive, well organized fashion. Master GMs should keep copious and orderly notes, even though time is also much a factor in this regard. Mapping the campaign world and areas within it, keying the maps, Developing campaign and scenario goals and objectives, and defining and describing the things and creatures encountered in reaching the goal all require a lot of effort and time to create and record properly. So he's really talking about spending the time to create the world around it, and taking copious notes and mapping and just taking all of your observations of what is going on in the real world and bringing them into your fictional setting for your campaign. Beyond that, polishing the whole body of work into the form needed for publication adds still more to effort and time costs. So now he's speaking very specifically for those individuals who are writing these campaigns or scenarios or adventures or whatever for the purpose of publication, which I would say is actually a step beyond what most game masters are going to do. Not everyone who plays the role of a game master is writing for the purpose of publication. They're writing for the purpose of running a game session at their table. This is more time and effort than most GMs can spare, and that is typically the reason why the majority of GMs have only sketchy materials to go with their scenario maps, relying on memory and the spur of the moment improvisation to pull off exciting and entertaining play sessions. It also accounts for the high degree of popularity of even average and unexciting scenarios sold commercially. Kind of odd that he's saying that, because he's talking about his own product line. So I guess he wasn't too impressed with the official modules. It's kind of strange. Time and effort reading and customizing modules is not so great as is required to create the same sort of adventure individually. Yeah, so buy a module, read it through, customize it to fit your world setting, and all of the other things that you've created, and it does in fact save time. And I can attest to that. I spent an entire year just writing my own materials, and it was a real tight thing to have the time to write an adventure almost every week, getting it ready for our weekly games. Now that I've been using official modules, but just highly modifying them, it's certainly a lot easier to do when you only have to tweak a few rooms and a few encounters and such, rather than writing from scratch. So I can definitely attest to that. Also, younger GMs might hesitate to develop their own material, feeling uncertain about their qualifications to undertake such a complex and complicated task. That is best understood in relation to experience. The younger game masters haven't been around to observe things and understand humanity, and this is sometimes reflected in their work. Likewise, their depth of learning, knowledge, and experience isn't as great as older GMs. This is exactly the reason why I stress using all non-gaming time towards your development as a game master. A master GM, regardless of age and experience, will strive to add to his or her general knowledge and understanding despite the limitations of time by observation, reflection, and the use of recall. We all are likely to know and understand more than we might imagine. Desire to accomplish things then brings this subconscious knowledge to the surface. So again, use every opportunity that you can to observe what's going on around you and think about bringing that to the game in some way. Um, this is really a luxury that Gary clearly had because this was his life's work here. This is all that he needed to focus on. I mean, other than, family and other things like that's unavoidable. But, you know, this was his work. And so, again, to spend every waking hour that you're not playing the game thinking about the game is something that most aren't going to be able to do. Desire remains the motivating force. It should spring from an individual drive to present as fine a campaign and adventure scenario as possible. All right, and that's absolutely true. I mean, I don't think any GM or dungeon master, um, sits down to start to plan out an adventure um, that they don't hope and they don't believe when they finally do bring it to the table, um, is going to be something that's going to be a lot of fun for the players to be engaged in, and they're going to enjoy running it and seeing what the players do within their um, their planned game sessions. So likewise, desire extends to the aspects of smaller scope, the presentation of your work, the problems posed to the players, the unique creative nature of your work. All these should be matters of pride. And I just finished saying that, and I hadn't read ahead yet. So, uh, a high degree of desire reflects favorably on you and adds to the enjoyment of the group. That in turn motivates players with a desire to excel. You are further inspired to even better GMing, and a synergism works to create overall continuing improvement. One thing as a school teacher, and this is something that I've observed over 20 plus years in my profession, that your students, and in this case, like the players, from in their interaction with the GM, students pick up on your enthusiasm. Students know when you're talking about something that you really care about. They know when you've really prepared for something. They just pick up on it. They sense it, and they respond in kind. For the most part, they're going to respond in kind, and your players in your group are also going to know when you prepared, how much you prepared. They'll get a sense of it, how confident you are in actually presenting the adventure to them, and how excited you are. They're certainly going to pick up on that. As this occurs, the opportunity will arise to extract the best ideas and scenarios for presentation to a larger audience, whether the forum is an amateur publication, a professional periodical, or commercially sold product. Again, he's getting into the nuts and bolts of writing for the business, and I'm not, even though I've published a few things like as very amateurish as it has been, um, that's not what I'm focusing on in reading this. What I'm reading this for is I want to explore what Gary Gygax is saying about becoming a great game master, basically. Such publications, in turn, inspires others on a far grander scale than word of mouth or face-to-face contact ever could. this is the most desirable thing. You have in truth evidenced desire by reading this book, that you are already expending effort, time, and money is evidenced by the fact that you are a game master. By applying just a little more time and effort, it is possible to move beyond your current level of accomplishment to a higher one. You can become a master GM. So, or perhaps you are that already, and now it is time to move on to the next stage and become a grandmaster GM. In either case, it isn't difficult, and even though you might never publish your own work for one reason or another, mastery, it is its own reward, and the players in your group will certainly appreciate your efforts as well. So, clearly, Gary is talking about putting an effort in, and that's the key thing. And before you can really put a genuine effort in, you have to have that desire. You have to have the desire to not just be a game master, but you have to have a desire to be, to be a really good one, to be a great one, to be a master game master. And although I kind of disagree with him where, he's really talking about the master game master is someone who's publishing work, I don't think that that's really necessary. And most of us won't end up doing that. I think your typical game master or dungeon master in Dungeons and Dragons is just looking to create their own adventures, and for their players to engage in those and to really enjoy playing them. And you're going to get a lot of your feedback and your and the value of your effort is going to come back to you by the way that the players respond to what you're doing at your table. And so I think that's really the key. So the publication part I don't think is necessary. You may never publish anything in your entire lifetime, and yet you can still be a master game master, and that's basically my take on it. I also see some similarities between like what Gary is saying here as far as observing the world around you and trying to bring as much of that into your game as well. You notice he's not talking about taking the game and taking it out into the world, but he's saying like you have to learn how to observe human interactions and then bring that into your game, because that will make your game, your setting, feel more real to the players, because they'll see real world interactions. They'll see the similarities of it. They'll see the simulation of it in your place. It reminds me of something that the RPG Pundit just recently mentioned in one of his videos, where he was talking about when you engage an NPC, just like when you engage a person, like I can go into the bodega by my school, and I've been going in there for 18 years, and I know the owner, very well. He knows me. He knows exactly what I'm going to order. When I go in there, I can tell what mood he's in sometimes. Like I've gone in there and I can tell right away if he's under the weather or something like that. Or when he's gone, for a week or so, when I know he's kind of on vacation, but when he comes back, he'll be a little bit more energetic. He'll be more energized because he just had several weeks off, and now he's back into the swing of things. Your NPCs in the world that you are controlling um, need to be that way as well. All right. So when the players are interacting with the tavern owner for their 17th time, um, that tavern owner shouldn't exact to they shouldn't be behaving exactly the way he or she was the previous 16 times. There's got to be some movement in difference uh, between when you've seen them this time and you've seen them 5 times, 5 days prior to that, and 10 days prior to that. There needs to be um, there needs to be a change from time to time, at least, in that character's mood and personality and such. And so I think that's what Gary's talking about too. Look at the way that people act in the real world and try to port that into your game so that the world feels like it's more alive for your players. So really, another, it was a challenging read because, like I said, there's parts of it that I'm not quite fully on board with, and then other parts that I can certainly see where he's coming from and do agree. So it's it's a really challenging type of read when you're thinking about everything that he wrote and trying to square it away with some of your own preconceptions and some of your own impressions about how to be a game master. And so it's just a really good experience to have when you're reading through some of his writings and just trying to, like I said, square it away with what you're doing as a dungeon master. And like I said, I mean, he never once in the first whole chapter used the term dungeon master yet. So I'm waiting to see when that actually comes up. So once again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Um, Thankfully, the sound quality should be better. And so once again, thanks for joining. Uh, Enjoy the rest of your evening. Look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon, and you all have a great upcoming weekend. It's almost Friday, so the weekend is almost upon us, and have a great gaming weekend if you get a chance to. Have a great day.